Welcome to Homespun Humor with the Austins. Hi, I'm TD, and today I'm going to tell you the story of the fireball. When my brother Harry was about 6 or 7 years old, he was fascinated with fire. I guess you could really call him a firebug. And being a creative, mischievous sort, he decided one day he was going to melt some crayons in a Vienna sausage can and make a little fire. Well, we made the fire directly in the can, and I joined into the fun. We made the fire out of on the front sidewalk, and what we did was put crayons in and added other things, wood chips, paper, anything that we could find that we thought would burn. Well, the fire began to grow. It got hotter and hotter, red hot, and then the fire actually turned blue, making a hissing sound, sort of like a torch. Shh. Well, Harry, for whatever the reason, decided that he was going to spit into the little can. Poof! Up came a fireball, the size of a softball. Harry just loved it, and he continued to spit into the can as we continued adding more crayons and other things. Well, Pop, hearing us laugh and holler with glee, came out the front door to see what we were up to. Seeing the fire, he yelled to Mama, "Bring me some water! These boys are going to burn the house down." Well, Mama brought out a quart jar of water, and remember, Pop had only seen the fire, not the spitting into the fire. He took that quart jar and stood right directly over the fire. Looking down into the flames so that he wouldn't miss, he poured the entire jar of water into the little can. Harry and I glanced at each other. We sort of knew what was about to happen, but we weren't going to say a word. Sure enough, when the water hit the can, poof! A huge basketball-sized fireball came shooting up into Pop's face. And as he stood there with his singed eyebrows smoking, he screamed to my mama, "Help me! These boys are trying to kill me!" Yes, Harry always did have a love of fire. In fact, that reminds me of the time that he almost burned my dad's store down. I guess you could call that Harry the Firebug strikes again. He did really almost burn the store down. As I said, he always had this love for fire, but to help you understand how he almost burned my dad's store down, let me first tell you a little bit about the store. Pop's first store was just a small shack that sat beside our house, and it served our little neighborhood. But Pop's dream was always to build a proper store. And when I was about 12 years old, he finally did just that. Where the little shack had stood, Pop had constructed a 40 by 80 foot concrete block building. It had two large double doors, one in the front and one in the side of the building. It also had two large windows, one on each side of the front door. He also had several small windows put in along the back wall near the roof line. This placement of the windows allowed for the installation of shelves along the back wall. Pop's store did very well. He not only stocked it with items from wholesale vendors, but also brought in fresh fruits and vegetables from local farmers in our little town of Chester, South Carolina. After the merchandise was stacked on the shelves, the boxes and the wooden crates were stored behind the building until the trash truck came to pick them up. Well, as I said before, Harry loved to watch fire. Unfortunately, his fascination with fire usually ended badly for him. He had already started a number of small fires over the years, but he really wanted to make a big one. And as a result of his mischievous thinking, he came to realize sitting there behind my dad's store was a bunch of stuff that would burn. So because he had gotten into trouble before, this time he thought he'd play it safe. He decided he would make the fire against the back side of Pop's concrete block building. After all, concrete wouldn't burn. Yes, indeed, Harry could build a magnificent fire behind the store. He started preparing the fire by stacking the wooden crates alternately with layers of the broken down cardboard behind the building. He also added some small tree limbs and paper as well. He then lit the whole thing on fire. And everything was going great. The concrete blocks weren't burning, the fire was growing, getting bigger, bigger, and bigger as the minutes passed. He then decided to add even more cardboard and more paper to make it even larger. My Pop's store was made of concrete block, but the roof was made of wood. As I mentioned earlier, there were windows just under the roof line along the back side of my dad's building, and as I was helping Pop in the store and he was finishing up with a customer, I noticed something moving outside of the small window near the middle. Pointing to the window, I asked Pop, "What's that?" He turned and glanced at the small window and turned back and said, "Flames," and he continued working on what he was doing. But after a few seconds, it sort of dawned on him what had been seen. And he said, "Flames? Fire!" And he went running for the side door to get outside to put the fire out. Well, he was so upset and frantic by this point, though, he fumbled and was unsuccessful in opening the door. As a result, he headed for the front door, yelling back at me, "Call the fire department!" Well, by the time Pop made it around to the back of the store, the fire was humongous, and there was Harry, sitting on the ground, mesmerized by it. Well, since there was no phone in the store, I ran over to the house to tell my mom what was happening. And by the time Pop had grabbed up an old rake and began pulling down the stack of burning debris, my mom had done got the garden hose and was heading for the back to put the fire out with the water from the hose. None of this commotion, though, made Harry very happy. Not because his fire was being put out, but because once again he had been caught in the act. He was in trouble again. Well, now, I'm not going to go into the details of the punishment that was meted out to Harry, but I can tell you two things. One is that he never did build another fire again. In fact, I believe it was at least 2 or 3 years before he'd even take a good look at a match. And second, and I tell you this is true, he had trouble sitting down for at least a couple of 3 weeks. I do believe you could say that Harry, the firebug, had finally learned his lesson. Thank you for listening. Join us next time when you'll have more homespun humor with the Austins.